Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Land. I'm Rivlin Marks, your host, with today's top stories from Israel and the surrounds. And you don't just have to find me here today. You can find me every Monday to Thursday right on this very platform, or if you prefer, on YouTube. And you can find us at the Israel Brief. And we would love it if you clicked on that big red subscribe button. But apart from welcoming you to the Israel Brief, I have to say marhaba. Israel today welcomed the Bahraini foreign minister and a high-level delegation to Israel for the very, very first time, an absolute historical meeting, and it was quite something to see the Gulf Air jet land in Ben Gurion Airport. And Foreign Minister Abdulatif Ben Zayed and his Israeli counterpart Gabi Ashkenazi held meetings, and in a press conference they reiterated mutual cooperation. But what was really exciting to hear is that the Bahrainis have granted permission to the Israelis to open up an embassy in their capital, Manama, and during the press conference, official permission was given for the Bahrainis to open up their embassy in Israel, and it was also announced that they hope to do this before the end of the year, and I can't think of a better way to end the year. And in other news, also related to improving relationships, last night it was announced that the Palestinian Authority will renew ties with Israel from the point where they left them off 6 months ago. The Palestinian Authority severed ties with Israel completely 6 months ago after the talk of the possibility of annexation. But last night it was announced that they will resume ties, especially security cooperation. In other news, the IDF struck Iranian Quds targets and Syrian armed forces targets in Syria in response to IEDs that were laying on Israel's side of the border yesterday. Israel has reiterated that this is a warning and we will not tolerate an infringement on our sovereignty. Meanwhile, the IDF remains in high alert for any possible retaliation. And speaking of Iran, their foreign minister Zarif has announced that they are prepared to discuss how a Biden presidency could re-enter talks about the Iranian nuclear contract. And finally, on the subject of President-elect Biden, both President Rivlin and Prime Minister Netanyahu both phoned the President-elect last night. From the President Rivlin's perspective, he reiterated that the relationship between Israel and the United States is based on shared values and is above partisan politics, and invited the President-elect to visit Jerusalem at his earliest convenience. And in his call with the President-elect, Prime Minister Netanyahu reiterated that we have a shared bond with the United States that is very strong, and Biden reiterated that he believes in a Jewish democratic Israel and that the United States of America will always be there to ensure Israel's security. So those are the top stories making headlines. Don't forget, you can check out our original content online on our website at www.layoftheland.online. You can read my latest article. It's called A Year of Awakening. It's all about woke and cancel culture, because it's not enough that we have to navigate a global pandemic. We also have to deal with this new phenomenon, which in some respects can be very, very frightening. It's also up on our Facebook page. While you're there, give it a share and give us a like and a follow, or interact with us on Twitter. You can find us at Lay of the Land with the digit 5. And I know you've already clicked on that big red subscribe button on our YouTube channel at the Israel Brief. So all that's left is for you to have a safe and a healthy rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you tomorrow for another edition of the Israel Brief.